All right, here we go into 6-4. There's only a few kingdoms left as we wrap things up. So, as you can see, Kingdom 3 is fungus. And here we see some cool looking mushrooms. All right, so some of the basic definitions of fungus include that they are eukaryotes. And you should know by now that means they have a nucleus. They can be unicellular or multicellular, and actually they can be multicellular to the extreme. So there's definitely some debate about what the largest organisms of all time are, but nowadays it's generally considered that the honey mushroom is the largest organism ever on Earth, and it is a fungus in Oregon that they figured out is 3.5 miles wide. And based on how fast it grows, they think it's 2,400 years old. So some people go, what? There's a mushroom that's 3 miles wide? No. So these are the mushrooms coming out of the material that the fungus is growing in. They're relatively normal sized mushrooms. So as we go through this, I will be teaching you what the body of a mushroom looks like. And it's actually like little threads. So that's really what a fungus is. They're kind of little threads that we're going to look at. So those threads are running through this forest in Oregon and recycling nutrients and decomposing things. And I guess some scientists found some of it, and then they found, maybe a mile away, they found something that looked exactly the same. And they had to have done DNA tests on it to even figure out it's the same organism. So we're not saying the same species. This is like one giant organism. And so through probably certain types of genetic testing, they spread out and they found the fringe and the area that this fungus is able to, that is growing through the soil. And it covers about 3.5 miles. And based on its growth rate, like I said, they think it's about 2,400 years old. So generally it's considered that the giant sequoia trees, which we'll be going over in our next section of notes, plants, and I'll show you some sequoia pictures, are considered the largest organisms of all time, but they certainly don't get 3.5 miles wide. So there's still some debate. Some say that that this might be the largest organism, but the trees are actually more massive. So if we put them on a scale, the trees would weigh more because they're more dense. Whereas this honey mushroom is made of all these little threads that are just kind of really stretched out. So, just an interesting organism. And then, of course, they are decomposers. So fungus will either absorb their nutrients, or if they have excess nutrients, they recycle them back into the ecosystem, which allows more life to exist. So when that life dies in the future, the decomposers and fungus get nutrients again. So in that way, they are really perfect organisms and really important for other things because they help other things survive and then decompose them when they die. And so here we have a couple weird fungus, and if you watch right here in the middle, here it comes. They are poo fungus. So they are help decomposing poo, which helps recycle those gross poop nutrients that still exist back into the soil where it can be used. So here's what a body of a fungus actually looks like, and for some reason they have two terms for this. I guess if they're on a smaller scale, the term is a hyphae, and these are tiny tubes that absorb and move decomposed nutrients around. And so you can, basically this is what the honey mushroom looks like underground. This is why it's all spread out. And then when there's a large mass of hyphae, the term is mycelium, and mycelium is generally seen as the fungus's body. So a whole bunch of hyphae creates mycelium, and that's what a fungus is. So you can see very simple organisms. Okay, fungus reproduce using fruiting bodies, which I went over in the protist notes. And these fruiting bodies release haploid spores. Again, as I mentioned before, spores are not male or female. They're kind of generic. So as long as they meet up with another spore, they can actually merge and make a new organism. So that would be seen as like sexual reproduction. So what we see down here is the mycelium. So the mushrooms only come up when they're starting to, and mushrooms are not the only type of fruiting body, which we'll talk about, but when the fruiting bodies come up like a mushroom, they are basically running out of nutrients, and so what they want to do is they send this up to release the spores from the gills, and then the spores can go out and they can try to spread into a new environment. But some people get a little grossed out by the reality of this, but when we eat mushrooms, we're actually eating the sexual reproductive part of the fungus. They can also reproduce through a process called budding. Not sure why this looks so blurry, but and that's an asexual cloning process. And this is a photo of budding in yeast. And so when we make bread, for instance, the yeast will keep budding until they run out of like sugar and resources to survive. And we can see some budding. This one kind of looks like it's about to split here, so maybe it's in like telophase. If you remember your terms, here's one that looks like it's about to split. This one's kind of stretching out. So here's one that looks like it's about to split right there. Maybe this one. All right, and then they also have really amazing ability to regenerate, which is like asexual healing. So if like an animal digs them up and tears it all up, they can actually regenerate and heal really amazingly and just carry on. And I couldn't find a picture of regeneration of funguses. It doesn't really like exist in photo form, maybe in video form. So instead I put a picture of Wolverine, and usually I ask someone in the class like, why does this picture make sense? So for those of you that are like, why does he have this picture? Usually somebody in class who understands, Marvel Comics, understands that Wolverine's main superpower is his ability to regenerate his injuries, and so that's why I have this picture. And it looks pretty cool. So here we'll shoot him in again. Okay, moving on. All right, so fungus evolved about 460 million years ago from protist slime molds. So they both have fruiting bodies. So slime molds have fruiting bodies. And then when they evolved into regular fungus, they also have fruiting bodies. So this is a fruiting body of a slime mold. And here's the fruiting body of a regular mold. And you can see there's a lot of similarity between them. It's pretty easy to understand that slime molds just got more advanced and evolved into fungus. And there are 4 fungus types, and they are classified by their fruiting bodies, which is how they reproduce. So let's go over those. All right, so we obviously have molds, and the fruiting bodies, these structures that we see in mold, are called sporangium, and they come out and they release the spores. So that's why they're called sporangium. And here it is growing on fruit or something. And here is the sporangium releasing hundreds of spores, and so it's pretty amazing. Like one sporangium can release a huge amount of spores. And they'll go out and try to find other spores so they can reproduce. And you may have seen mold growing on your bread. So this is exaggerated, the size, but here's the mycelium down in the bread. And then when it starts running out of nutrients, it wants to spread out, so it'll pull the sporangium up and release spores to try to spread out. And you may have heard of toxic mold, which is what's shown in this picture. Really blurry again. I don't know if this computer is blurring my pictures, but you want to be wary of this. This is obviously like really, really bad, but these molds can be toxic and dangerous because when they release their spores, we can inhale them and they can make us sick and can even be like deadly. So, you definitely want to tell anybody at home if you notice any weird molds growing, especially like in an old shed or garage that's not used a lot and maybe built up a bunch of moisture and could have a dangerous mold growing. Okay, mushrooms are the fruiting bodies of what are called club fungus. So a club can kind of mean like a hammer. So they kind of have that sort of hammer shape. And the spores come out of gills, and this one is kind of turned up so we can really see the gills that the spores would come out of this one. And this one's just kind of a cool looking mushroom. So let's look at it. So this one, the gills are really pronounced. And so this is like got super gills, and so the spores would fall out of these holes. We definitely got some weird club fungus. So this one's kind of cool, and some of them look like they'd be something in Alice in Wonderland because that had a lot of mushrooms in it. Here's some other really cool looking club fungus. Some other ones, and here you can see the gills, really colorful. And then even some that don't really look like mushrooms could be classified as a club fungus. That's like a weird one. Here's another weird one that I guess is also classified as a club fungus, and obviously does not look like a mushroom at all. And this one too is really weird. Looks like it's bleeding or something. I'm guessing it might attract insects or something, because insects can help spread the spores of fungus. Kind of like like bees would spread pollen for a flower. So not sure what else this would be for, unless somehow it's to attract insects or something. Oh, and then not sure if you ever seen these kind before, but they have these kind of weird face structures on them, which is really strange, and I guess they're pretty rare, but they've kind of evolved to mimic the face of a human, kind of, and maybe to protect itself or something. And so I think some students have told me that they've seen these, and these are definitely weird. And usually by now, if we were in class, there would be a number of students protesting and saying these aren't real, and they aren't. I just have this slide because it's just so weird, and it does usually create a reaction in class. All right, then we have what are called sac fungus. So sac meaning like a pouch, and the fruiting bodies are called ascus. And so here you see this kind of pouch or bag shape of a sac fungus. Here's some other ones. Here again we get that kind of bag or pouch shape. Same again here. Almost looks like a pot, like you'd put a plant in or something. And these ones have evolved where rain comes in and hits inside, and then it knocks the spores out, and then the spores swim. So these are going to be found in forests that are going to have a lot more rain, so that to help with that. And then we do have some edible sac fungus. You may have seen morels on like a fancy salad. And then truffles, I believe, are the most expensive food in the world. I have a pretty interesting movie on fungus, actually, that I used to play in class, where the guy actually says they cost more pound for pound than gold. So this basket must be worth a lot. And usually I ask, like, does anybody know what kind of animals they use to try to find these? And usually some people know that they'll use pigs, because pigs will find them on their own. So they'll put a leash on a pig, and then of course they're not going to let them eat them, because it would be like eating gold. And I think now they're training some dogs to find them too, but pigs will just naturally find them, and very, very expensive. I don't know, I'm sure some of you have had truffles. It's kind of a unique taste. I really like the taste, but some people might not. But very expensive. And then the last one